7 strangers are abducted and forced to participate in a sadistic man's house party with their lives on the line. In an unknown house, Lupe wakes up and finds herself restrained. Simon is also tied up next to her, struggling to break free. He finally manages to free himself and helps her out. Lupe's parents are calling for her nearby, and she slides over to them. Esteban and Marta embrace their daughter, and they work together to untie their bindings. Now unbound, Simon offers Armando his assistance. When Armando's hands are freed, Simon instructs him to help the woman. Armando calms Teresa and frees her hands, while Simon proceeds to untie Jose. With no one else to help, Simon attempts to open the doors, but they're locked. Uncertainty lingers in the room, wondering why they've been brought together. Despite Lupe's warning, Simon gets a glass of water. He drinks, stating that if they were meant to be killed, it would have already happened. The shivering Teresa also requests a glass of water. Simon then asks if anyone remembers anything prior to being abducted. Teresa shares that she was at a hotel preparing for her flight. When she went outside her room, she was abducted and she soon found herself restrained in a car. Esteban concludes that they've been kidnapped for ransom and suggests that they wait for the kidnappers' demands. Then, Armando recollects being at a medical conference when 2 intruders entered his room. Marta adds that they were abducted in the city. Lupe starts to panic, afraid that they're going to die. Esteban reassures his daughter that they'll be released once the ransom is paid. However, Jose disagrees, recounting how he was subjected to torment without any demands. Armando examines Jose's injuries and confirms that the intent was to inflict pain, not to kill. Simon proposes introductions to uncover any connections among them. Therefore, Simon introduces himself as a police lieutenant. Esteban and Marta reveal that they're owners of a group of companies, and Lupe discloses that she's a lawyer. Armando shares he's a surgeon, and Teresa mentions being a flight attendant. Lastly, Jose states that he's retired. However, he couldn't clarify because he was interrupted by an incoming message from a machine across the room. Simon reads it, saying that they're part of a game. Immediately after, a disembodied voice announces the rules. They must choose someone to die, the chosen must accept death, and lastly, no one is allowed to volunteer. They're given 1 hour to decide, warning that failure to choose will result in everyone's death. Then, a timer starts counting down. As panic sets in, Marta takes control of the situation, and Esteban states that this is just an attempt to extort more money. The businesswoman asserts that they are important figures, confident that people are already looking for them. Armando disagrees with simply waiting, citing Jose's experience demonstrates that their captors aren't interested in money. Lupe argues that choosing someone to die doesn't guarantee safety. Then Teresa proposes that Simon should be their choice, as it's his duty to protect others. Taken aback, the lieutenant explains that protecting others and sacrificing oneself are 2 separate matters. Amid the bickering, Jose volunteers as tribute simply because he's the eldest. The older women swiftly accept, but Lupe is disgusted by their decision. Armando acknowledges that it's a terrible reality, but age is also how they decide in hospitals. The lawyer retorts that they aren't in a hospital and moves to Jose's side. Defiantly, Lupe announces that Jose's life is equal to everyone else's. The surgeon challenges her, asking if she's willing to take his place. Seeing her daughter speechless, Marta intervenes, advising her not to further complicate their situation. However, she resists and proposes they vote. Armando and Teresa immediately refuse, and the lawyer argues that age doesn't define a person's worth. The surgeon proposes that they evaluate each individual's merit, saying he saves the lives of 60 people each year, making him the most valuable in the room. Marta counters that they employ 80,000 people and sustain their livelihoods. Desperate, Armando retorts to personal attacks, calling Esteban a coward for not volunteering to save his family. Jose intervenes, urging everyone to end the bickering and choose him. Lupe continues to oppose the idea, but Marta thanks the retiree for his generosity. Teresa approaches Jose thanking him, and Lupe accuses them of manipulation. Jose admits that he's done things that make him deserving of this fate. Simon approaches, seeking a confession, but the old man is unwilling to elaborate. Suddenly, a side door opens, and Jose is unceremoniously shot, leaving Simon in shock. As the door closes, they catch a glimpse of a man and a woman inside. The voice from before reiterates that Jose violated Rule 3 and restates the rules for their understanding, emphasizing that the game is ongoing. The businessman then shouts, demanding their price. Amidst the bickering between Armando and Esteban, the main door abruptly opens. They warily file through and discover a game room located below. Armando sees a row of envelopes, and he reads the first one. It instructs them to answer a series of questions and solve a word puzzle. Esteban asks what would happen if they don't play, prompting Armando to angrily remind him of the two executioners. Simon offers to help with the puzzle board to place the answers, so Armando begins reading the questions. The first question is directed at Esteban, asking for the surname of their company's figurehead. Esteban insists that he doesn't have fake leaders, but Marta answers it for him. Next, Armando deduces that Teresa is addicted to stimulants, diagnosing her as currently going through withdrawal. It's also revealed that, though she's a lawyer, Lupe didn't graduate college. More revelations unfold, including Simon's betrayal of his partner Lorenzo is brought to light, but the lieutenant clarifies that he only reported Lorenzo's corruption. When asked about Marta's sister's name, Lupe asserts that her mother is an only child. Reluctantly, Marta reveals the name Ophelia, surprising her daughter with a revelation that she has an aunt. She stammers, explaining that Ophelia passed away long ago. Continuing on with the questions, the only information they have about Jose is that he's retired. Then, Teresa quickly gives the name of her dealer. As for Armando, it's revealed that he has gonorrhea. The final question revolves around Esteban's latest paramour, which Marta answers. When Lupe asks who Alejandra is, Marta explains that she was his last secretary. The puzzle spells out Pablo Hega, and Lupe asks if anyone is familiar with the name. Simon realizes that the answer to Jose's question is incorrect and replaces it with a V. The lieutenant then reveals that Pablo Vega is a sadistic man who's killed numerous corrupt officials through macabre games. Simon explains that Pablo always manages to elude capture, never revealing his face to anyone. Afterward, Simon recounts their last encounter at a motel. As they breached the door, the lieutenant saw a silhouette of someone reaching for their waist, assuming Pablo was going for a weapon. In response, the lieutenant fired, but the person he shot was Pablo's wife, later learning that by the time they arrived, Pablo had already escaped. Considering Pablo's modus operandi, Simon is certain that he is responsible for their abduction. Suddenly, Armando shouts apologies to Pablo, saying a certain woman was already in critical condition when she arrived on his operating table. Confused, Lupe asks for clarification, and the surgeon explains that Patricia, Pablo's mother, was the victim of a hit and run, and he was her surgeon. Unexpectedly, Teresa confronts Armando, accusing him of lying. She confesses that she was the driver involved in the accident, but insists that the woman survived. Teresa's guilt led her to search nearby hospitals and eventually found Patricia, and was informed that she had only sustained fractures in her leg. Suddenly, Armando initiates a vote, nominating Teresa. The flight attendant becomes aggressive, and Armando retaliates. Simon intervenes, standing against the surgeon. Tension escalates as the surgeon campaigns against Teresa, citing her addiction and recklessness makes her a deserving choice. Teresa challenges the surgeon, questioning why he's among them if he truly believes in his self-righteous attitude. All of a sudden, one of the props springs to life, and a recording of Nurse Lopez starts playing. She reveals that the woman died due to Armando's arrogance, failing to heed her warnings and inadvertently punctured Patricia's esophagus, leading to her demise. Overwhelmed by the truth, Armando lashes out and vividly recalls the day young Pablo discovered his mother's fate. Amidst Teresa's accusations, Armando downplays his mistake, suggesting that risks are inherent when providing medical care to others. He then belittles the flight attendant by dismissing her job as a glorified waitress. Enraged, Teresa initiates a vote, nominating the surgeon. Lupe interjects, reminding everyone that the captor's intentions are for them to turn against one another. Esteban mediates, stating that his family won't vote against each other. Thus, the only viable candidates are Armando, Teresa, and Simon. Armando and Teresa attempt to sow discord between the couple by reiterating that Esteban cheated, but Marta remains unfazed. Then, the businessman accuses Simon of being the one who hurt Pablo the most. The lieutenant disagrees, asserting that they're all somehow responsible. He muses what actions the family did to provoke their abduction. Esteban confidently maintains that his family did nothing. However, Marta reveals that Patricia, once their housekeeper, resigned when she became pregnant. Armando then accuses the businessman of impregnating her, but his wife scoffs at the idea. Teresa asserts that the family is concealing something about the pregnancy, leading Lupe to question her own parents too. Abruptly, the doors open, revealing the next room where the voice instructs them to search for the details that hold the truth. Inside are pictures depicting milestones in a child's life. Meanwhile, Marta expresses concern about their secret being exposed, but Esteban assures her that the others will be consumed by conflict before that occurs. Marta then implores her husband to let her die if worst comes to worst. As Lupe and Teresa examine the pictures, the flight attendant expresses regret over her shortcomings as a mother. Later, Lupe informs her parents about Teresa's weakness. Soon after, Armando discovers a picture featuring Patricia, Esteban, and Marta in Paris. Lupe learns that Patricia is in fact Ophelia, and that Pablo is her cousin. Simon then adds that the pictures hold messages, like one that states Pablo was born in an asylum. Lupe is in disbelief that her aunt gave birth in such a place, prompting Marta to unveil the truth. Marta reveals that her older sister, Ophelia, was mentally troubled and tried to end her life multiple times, prompting their father to confine her into an asylum. Marta recounts that treatment was working until someone took advantage of Ophelia. Despite their counsel, she kept the baby. He was born with a birthmark on his arm, but Marta gave him to a midwife. The flight attendant then blames them for their predicament, asserting that this is a consequence of Pablo's troubled past. With time running out, Armando confirms with Simone and Teresa that none of them are willing to die. Then he addresses Esteban, telling them they'll all die together. However, their family will perish with the knowledge that they could have saved Lupe. Armando claims that Lupe's presence is part of the test to determine whether they'd be willing to sacrifice their lives for her. Marta, seeking to use the flight attendant's weakness, offers to take care of her son if Teresa accepts being chosen. Simone warns that it's a trick and her son won't actually receive the money. In contrast, Esteban assures the flight attendant that if she agrees, her son will never have to face financial difficulties again. Teresa tearfully acknowledges that the money would change her son's life, but she spits that it would only corrupt him, just like the rest of them. She firmly states that either one of the parents dies or they all perish with their daughter. Cornered, Esteban discreetly signals Simon, prompting him to initiate a vote for Esteban. Armando and Teresa swiftly follow suit. When the businessman agrees, Marta begins shouldering all the responsibility, declaring that she should be chosen. Amid Lupe's cries, her mother begins saying her goodbyes. The group changes their votes, and the businesswoman forces her family to choose her as well. Afterwards, she calls out to Pablo that she's accepted her fate. She kneels in front of the timer, praying for her family's safety. Then the timer stops, and another door opens. The group goes through, and they're told to enjoy the feast before them. In Teresa's assigned seat is a container with substance, which tempts her. Armando suggests she take one before the withdrawal kills her. She hesitates but ultimately refuses, saying it's already damaged her life enough. Armando and Simone begin eating, and Teresa can't fathom how they have an appetite. Optimistic, Lupe declares that no one died because Marta was forgiven. Teresa gazes at the frozen timer and hopes they've all been forgiven. Lupe reminds them of Jose, and Simone speculates that he may have been Pablo's father, the one who took advantage of Ophelia. When reaching for the roast, Simone accidentally cuts himself. Armando discovers a dagger hidden within. It bears a message, instructing them to take matters into their own hands. Suddenly, the timer resumes counting down. Armando's intentions become clear and everyone retreats. The surgeon reminds them of Marta's agreement and promises to make it painless. He lunges forward, but Esteban intercepts the attack. They struggle, and the businessman seizes a nearby glass, bludgeoning Armando. This allows Esteban to overpower him, reversing the blade and driving it into the surgeon. With Armando dying, Teresa pleads with him to free them from the game and initiates a vote for his sacrifice. Then, Simone and the others follow suit. The surgeon agrees to die, and realizing that time is running out, calls Esteban to finish the job. After taking a moment to prepare himself, Armando dies just like Patricia, with a punctured esophagus. At the last second, the timer stops and the doors open. Simone retrieves the dagger and Teresa apologizes to Armando's lifeless body. She also grabs the substances before leaving. The group goes upstairs while Pablo's two executioners are sent to pursue them. Soon they find themselves outside in a maze. Esteban leads his family through another path, but Lupe suggests they stick together. As they circle back, they run into the executioners. Gunshots ring out, and Teresa, frightened, runs off on her own. She eventually finds a high vantage point with a clear view of the maze, but as she tries to take the substance to alleviate her withdrawals, she fumbles and drops it. Fortunately, this allows her to avoid being seen by one of the executioners before finally taking the substance. Meanwhile, the family is being pursued by the man, but they manage to lose him. Lupe discovers a small crawl space, and they use it to bypass the maze. Elsewhere, Teresa spots the exit and dashes towards it. However, just as she reaches the outside, a truck collides with her. As she lies in pain, a familiar figure approaches her. She realizes that all this time, Simone was Pablo Vega. Teresa begs to be reunited with her son, but Simone simply returns to his truck and drives off just like she did with his mother. Outside the maze, the family discovers a boat anchored in a cove, and they swim towards it. As they prepare to sail, Simone arrives, pleading for them to wait. Lupe stops her father, while Marta helps Simone up. As the lieutenant helps with preparations, Marta notices his birthmark. Suddenly, Simone brandishes two guns and positions the parents in front of him, with Lupe by his side. He declares that they'll engage in a game of Russian Russian roulette. Furthermore, he warns them that failure to cooperate will result in their daughter being shot. He then hands the revolver to Marta, instructing her to aim at Esteban's head. However, she can't. To coerce her, Simon reveals that Alejandra wasn't a secretary, but Lupe's classmate. Esteban denies it, but the fake lieutenant lists more of his daughter's manipulated classmates. At gunpoint, Simon then asks them to guess who's next in the list. Met with silence, he reveals that it's their daughter. Marta is unwilling to believe it, but Lupe confirms the truth. Still, Marta is unable to shoot, so Simon takes the gun and hands it to Esteban, saying it's his turn to point it at his wife. The businessman apologizes and quickly pulls the trigger, revealing that the gun isn't loaded, to Simon's satisfaction. He tells Marta it's easy for Esteban to pull the trigger because he lacks empathy. Off in the distance, the two executioners arrive, and Lupe signs to them that everything is under control. Lupe then confesses that she's been suffering all this time. When Marta interjects that all of her husband's relationships have been consensual, her daughter points the gun at Esteban and snarls that they were too young to give consent. She also angrily recounts her own experiences with the leering gaze and unwelcome advances from her father. Lupe directs her attention to her mother, accusing her of turning a blind eye to the truth that she'd known all along. Despite Simon's urging, Lupe is unable to pull the trigger, so Simon takes matters into his own hands. Afterward, Simon confronts his aunt, lamenting that if she'd shown more compassion in the past, everything could have turned out differently. As for Marta, her fate mirrors the suffering that Ophelia endured in the asylum. In the end, Pablo exacted his revenge, ensuring that everyone faced similar consequences for the pain they had caused.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.